In this lesson, I'm going to teach you how to make chocolate fatless cake. So fatless cake, we don't have any butter or oil in this specific recipe, and we are going to use and we also don't have any baking powder or leavening agents as well. So the volume from which we will get the egg whites and the sugar together form meringue, and then we'll have the yolks and half of the sugar, and then we are going to get another texture which is the ribbon consistency, and then you're going to fold all of them together. So the leavening comes from the egg whites and the meringue itself, and there's no fat in it and there's no leavening agents also in this. So this is a very interesting recipe, and this specifically is a very light cake, and it soaks up quite a good amount of sugar syrup, and this will be used where we have to use lighter fillings, and then where we have to serve them directly from the fridge, because we'll be able to soak it with sugar syrup, and then the sponge will be very light, and we are going to use lighter fillings like the mousse. And this specific recipe we are going to use to make s'mores cake in this particular course. So I'll have the ingredients ready here, which is the sugar, and half the sugar will go with the yolk and half will go with the white. And then for the dry, I have corn flour, all-purpose flour, and cocoa powder. I'm going to sift all these three together, and vanilla, it could be added with yolk or with meringue as well. Okay, so I'm just going to first start with sifting the dry ingredients. I have a separate bowl here. Into that, corn flour, and cocoa powder. So this I'm going to set it aside. So with the stand mixer, I'm going to start with beating the yolks first, and I'm going to fit it with paddle attachment. I'm going to add the yolks in, and once I have the yolks beating and then broken out really well, and then half the sugar, now I am going to eyeball and then add half of it to the yolk, and then leave the rest to go with the white. And if you are not able to do that, then you can just divide them separately into two different bowls, so you're not going to miss out on the measurements. So half will go into the yolk and half will go into the white. You see, it's turned really very pale. It's there with the ribbon consistency as well. I'm just going to scrape down and add the vanilla extract and beat until it is combined. I'm going to set this one aside and then move on to beating the whites. This is done. Scrape out and mix it well. Just going to set this one aside and then get another bowl. So this is a clean fresh bowl with a clean fresh beater. Now if you are going to have only one beater, maybe if it is a handheld beater, then you can just use the same thing, but then start with beating the white first, and then you could just remove the meringue and set the meringue out separately and then beat the yolk, because you cannot use the same beater to beat the yolk, and even if you wash it, there could be a little bit of fat content sticking to it, because if you are in a hurry and not washed properly and then to get into the meringue, then the meringue will not foam up. Now if your meringue doesn't foam up, then which means it is just broken and you cannot use it. So you might have to trash that and then use a fresh batch of egg whites to make your meringue. Okay. Getting the stand mixer and adding the whites in, and now whites have to be beaten up first, and once you find it frothy, and then we need to add the sugar a little at a time until we have the meringue form. It should be glossy and anywhere between soft peaks to stiff peaks, anywhere between that is fine, but we have to wait for the meringue to be glossy and not too loose as well. So now the egg whites are frothy and I'm going to add the sugar. I'm just going to check on the meringue how it looks. I just want it glossy, and it is quite stiff as well. The peak is not even falling down, but then it is glossy also, so I don't want to beat any further. So I have all the three components ready to go. I have the yolks mixture in ribbon consistency and the meringue and then the flour. Now I'm going to keep the yolks bowl as the one in which I'm going to add the other two. I'm going to add alternately the flour and the meringue in 3 parts. I'm going to fold. Now this specific recipe where we have the volume that we got from whipping the egg whites, and that is what is the leavener itself. Now if you're going to overfold at any point of time, the sponge will deflate. The batter itself will kind of become watery. We are going to look at having a very thick batter at this stage, and that is what is going to give the volume and the sponginess for the final cake, and that is very important. So you have to be careful because these are certain technical things, and we are learning advanced techniques as the course grows from week by week. And so this is one important step that we need to keep in mind, that we should not overfold the batter and try and retain the thickness of the final batter as much possible. Okay, so I'm going to do that and show, so you'll be able to also do the same thing as you are working on it. Now the flour, I just don't want to drop all the flour in one place. I just want to just sprinkle it over. I'm eyeballing and dividing the flour in two parts, and then the meringue, I'm just going to pick up one part of the meringue. I'm just going to cut and fold. When I'm going to cut and fold, I just want to break the whites and then go to the bottom. So even when you see traces, little bit of the traces of the white during your first addition, never mind, you don't have to kind of really incorporate everything together, otherwise that is going to lead to overbeating. So even when you see the streaks of white here and there, then the flour also looks like it is not mixed up a bit. Doesn't matter, because by overfolding we are just going to thin down the batter, that we don't want to do. Now second part of the flour, just drizzle it on the top. Then the second part of the meringue as well. Break the meringue. Just break where you see the whites and you have a thick batter like that. Just stop folding it further, and then I'm going to add the last part of the flour. And then all the remaining whites. I'm just going to fold them. Make sure very gently you are just breaking the whites, and when you have everything combined, you will stop folding, because any further the batter will just thin down. So this is the texture, a very thick batter where you have all the whites and the flour, everything mixed together. After the stage, you just completely stop folding. Okay, and then it is ready to transfer into the prepared baking pans. So I have two 6-inch pans. I'm going to divide it between two. You could do it in one, and then you're going to have a tall cake, and that's going to take up more baking time. I'm going to have thinner sponges. Each of them I'm going to toast it into two and then use. I'm just going to spread it out and level the top, because it's a thick batter. And that's a pretty thin sponge, but because I'm going to need two layers from each, and I'm also looking at not to over bake, I'm just baking this amount of batter itself in two pans. With these sponges we will anyway be using sugar syrup, All the more it is always good to have lesser baking time in the oven. So you have your sponge naturally having its moisture without having to evaporate so much while getting baked. Okay, so I'm just going to tap this. And that will release any bigger air pockets. And now this I'm going to bake it at 160 degrees Celsius for about 20-25 minutes because we have lesser batter. Now if you're going to put this in one single 6-inch pan, then you might have to bake for about 30-35 minutes. However, we know that the cake will be done if you have the toothpick inserted into the center that comes out clean and not wobbly at all. So I'll get back to show you after the cakes have been baked. So we have the Fatless chocolate sponge out of the oven. I'm just going to check for doneness. It's come out clean. I'm just going to put it down onto the wire rack. It is a pretty thin sponge. I'm going to also further tote it down into 2 because we are looking at having thin layers. So it's a really very light sponge. It doesn't have enough weight. Also, the weight will come by adding in sugar syrup. Each of this I will cut it into 2, and then I'm just going to show you how I'm going to use this on the cake.